Dodson's Corner has had some hood classic videos, but today we're talking about UFC performances that the streets won't forget. Some of these are legendary performances that I think are underrated, and some of these are just fights from this year that I think shouldn't be forgotten.
Yeah, like these performances from these fighters are legendary and will always have the boys' approval. You know, it'll be 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. We're going to have kids and, Dad, tell me about that time that Dominic Reyes almost beat John Jones. Hop right out of your chair.
Exactly. Get a stiffy. Not because of the kid.
All right. Well, I have mine ranked. Lucas doesn't have his ranked, so...
So I'm just going to have to guess my ranking.
Yeah, so I'm starting off at number 10. Yuri Prochazka beats Glover Teixeira, UFC 275. It was one of the best fights of all time, and it was kind of Yuri's moment where like he got the belt, obviously, and like that beautiful rear naked choke, like just everything about that performance. It was like, I think Yuri's far from where he was in that fight. It was kind of like he peaked really high in that fight, and like he's here, you know, he's a good fighter, but there he was a great fighter. You know, it was a fight that, especially with it being one of the best fights of all time, some even consider it the best fight of all time. It's just a fight that no one will ever forget. And then obviously you go in the winner of that fight, you know, the winner of the best fight of all time.
Yeah.
Yuri Prochazka, like how can you ever forget that?
I think the reason why I didn't have that one, I did think about it, but the reason I didn't have it is because I think it's already considered like a great fight. I'm more of when I tried to pick ones that don't get talked about very much. I do think that one gets quite a bit of recognition.
That's why it's at 10.
Fair
and
enough.
This list was hard to make.
It was.
This list was so hard. It took me so long.
At my number 10, I do feel like our lists are going to be a little bit different in the sense that I went for more recent fights that I think like I'm not going to forget them, you know? Yeah. So for my number 10 spot, I have Jim Miller versus Damon Jackson.
Ooh.
The first round submission, Jim Miller just absolutely cooking that fraud. Like, it was so hype. Everyone was hyped around the house and like unexpected too, because you're like, Jim Miller kind of
got destroyed last time versus Bobby Green, like bloody as all heck.
And then to come out, get a first round submission against Damon Jackson, who's, you know, you're wondering how good he is still. You know, it's been a while since Damon Jackson has gotten anything interesting.
Yeah, and Jim Miller got that dub, and everyone's like, oh, he's retiring. I'm going for 50. Yeah. I'm going for 50. And we're like, oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. He's going to be here for 5 more years.
Yeah, Bobby Green rematch. Where you at?
All right, moving on to my number 9. A fight from this year. Dan Hooker beats Gamrot at UFC 305. You know, coming into this fight, everyone had their money on Gamrot. Everyone was going with Gamrot. Hooker was like a minus or a plus 300 underdog or something like that. You know, nobody had any faith in Hooker. They're like, oh, he's just going to get sat on by Gamrot for 3 rounds, lose a 30-27 decision. And then, boom, the tatted psychopath walks out in Perth. Were they in Perth?
Yeah.
Walks out in Perth and goes to work. You know, it was a legendary performance. This guy is truly, like, I think it's with Dan Hooker. Dude just, he takes a while to fight, you know, and then every time he comes back once a year, it's like, oh yeah, Dan Hooker. Yeah. I forgot about this guy.
Yeah.
But with a performance like this, I hope that the boys don't forget about this performance, you know? The streets surely won't remember it.
Dude, we got to go.
Won't forget it.
We got to go to Australia and go train at City Kickboxing. All right, my next pick, I'm going to go with this one. Kevin Holland versus Michelle Oleksiejczuk. This one for me, it's tough because I feel like Kevin Holland has a lot of good performances. He either shows out or he just gets trampled. And this one, he was coming off a loss. And you're wondering, okay, he should win this fight. But with Kevin Holland, you literally never know. Yeah. So for him to get absolutely rocked and dropped at the beginning of the first round by Oleksiejczuk, you're like, come on, dude. And then Oleksiejczuk is an idiot, way too overzealous. And then just that arm bar, I think he broke his arm.
He broke it, and like Oleksiejczuk, like, because I think Oleksiejczuk, it was in his head that like, oh, I effed up so bad. I can't lose this fight now.
Yeah.
Refused to tap, and then Herb Dean eventually, like, without Oleksiejczuk tapping, just ended it. After he saw the snap, he was like, oh, we're done here.
Yeah, so it's always nice to see a Kevin Holland win.
Yeah, and I remember, like, I've seen that clip so many times. Oleksiejczuk is, like, mad at Herb Dean for stopping the fight as his arm's like, like, bro,
I'm fine.
Bro. I'm realizing now that there's a lot of fights on here that, like, these are some of the most legendary fights of all time, but, like, the performances, like, 100 years from now,
100 years.
Dana White's funeral, like these are the performances we're going to talk about.
In the background for the slideshow they're playing.
Adesanya beats Pereira, UFC 287. You know, coming into this fight, Pereira was 3-0 against Adesanya, and you know what, was looking pretty good in that fight up until Izzy with the boom, Pereira. Shama. I don't know. Like, that fight is legendary. The way that Adesanya finally got it back. You know? And
It is legendary. I don't like it, but it is.
Yeah, it sucks. It's not what the fans wanted, but...
No, I think it is what the fans wanted.
I mean, actually, technically at that time, I think Adesanya was, like, the hero in that rivalry.
Yeah.
Pereira was the Sith.
All right, nerd. All right, for my number 8 pick, I have Oralby versus Rebecca. Now, this one, I know it's not like we've talked about it a lot.
But who are the streets not forgetting? Rebecca or Oralby?
Both of them.
So this is performances from both of them?
Yeah, dude.
Okay.
Both of them. I think both of them had a great performance. But I'm just saying, the streets aren't forgetting this fight because how could you?
Yeah.
Like, Mammoth Hunter versus Rebecca, and somehow Rebecca gets the win. He was quite a big underdog in that fight. I think everyone was just high on Oralby, but we've talked about so much, so I'm not gonna harp on it. But we were in the kitchen cooking, and then this fight starts heating up, and you're like, "Holy, we need to stop everything."
I was in the kitchen; they were watching, and then I missed like
we were going back and forth.
Yeah, I missed like probably like the first round of it, but then I heard like some scream from someone, and I was like, burn those eggs. You know what? I'm more committed. How am I missing Oralby? Like, I just timed that so poorly.
Yeah.
I think it's what every fight on through it was so good. It was like, we had to cook. We got to eat eventually.
I know. And the reason I don't have this higher is because it was talked about for like a fight of the year contender for a lot of people. So it's not forgotten, but it is one of my favorite fights from this year.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to my number 7 pick. Jorge Masvidal beats Ben Askren, UFC 239. Like, this fight was so good because there was actual genuine, like, real life hatred. These guys genuinely hated each other. And then we have Jorge Masvidal come in and get the fastest KO in UFC history with that flying knee.
Yeah.
It's like, what else can you really ask for from a performance? You know, Masvidal, his career, you think about it, you know what, there's the Colby rivalry. He was the BMF champion, but like...
The Usman fight.
But, like, it was that Askren KO. Like, that is his top moment. Of a guy who really wasn't that good, but is carried by some clips.
Well, until he comes back in Miami and sleeps Leon Edwards, right?
Yeah, he's a clip farmer.
No, that's fair. It is one of the best performances of all time. Also extremely hype. For my number 7 pick, I'm going to go with one that you're going to like a lot. Paddy Pimblett versus King Green.
I almost put it on my list.
Oh, you don't have it?
No.
Wow. Okay, I was like, this is probably going to be number 1 for you.
No, it was an easy fight. Easy performance.
It was, but going into that fight, I think this was like, well, Paddy Pimblett had almost lost to Jared Gordon. Like, arguably, a lot of people think that's one of the biggest robberies of all time. But going into this fight, it's like, okay, this is Paddy Pimblett's chance to get ranked. Like, this is real now.
Yeah, and I mean, like, he was, like, not coming off the best ones. Like, he had just beaten Tony Ferguson.
Yeah.
Like,
so it's like, how good is he really?
Yeah.
And to come out against King Green, the GOAT.
And, like, double submit him in the first round.
Yeah, double submit him. Islam Makhachev could never. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a win that is actually really good. You know, it got him into the rankings and like...
And now everyone's high on him again.
Exactly. Except for all the people in our comments when I put him at number 1 of every single blind ranking. As I'm laughing there, making a joke, talking about Paddy Pimblett being at number 1.
But you're not kidding.
Like obviously... I would put, if I could, on personal opinion, I'd put Paddy at 1 for everything. But like, I'm not dumb. But he just always ends up at 1.
Well, you're kind of dumb.
And we make jokes. People think like it hurt. It really affects people. People lose sleep over us.
I thought you were gonna say it affects you.
No,
you lose sleep over it when someone disses your boy Paddy.
No, but like when people diss us for the stupid things. Like, we had a tier list where Pereira ended up at 5 on Aura. And I was like, you know what? No, that's right. People are probably pissed about that.
Oh, yeah. I just posted that yesterday, so we'll see.
Yeah.
See how that goes.
All right. My number 6, Sean O'Malley versus Kashikayan. This was on the Dana White Consenter series.
Just say this again.
All right.
Consenter series? Bro, Dana doesn't need consent.
All right. My number 6, Sean O'Malley versus Kashikayan on the Dana White Contender series.
Dana.
Welcome to the Sugar Show is really all I need to say.
You put that in there just so you could say welcome to the Sugar Show.
Welcome to the Sugar Show. No, because it genuinely is a performance that, like, it was one of the best debuts of all time.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, oh crap, this dude actually is like legit.
Yeah.
He has potential to be a champ, and he ended up being a champ, you know? It was the start of this whole, like, you know, bigger than the UFC Sean O'Malley, you know, trying to be one of those like global superstars who's also a UFC fighter.
Yeah.
So having that first iconic KO and like walking off, welcome to like jumping up, welcome to Sugar, and like Dana's reaction is like,
This kid's legit, man.
yeah. So you can't forget where Sean O'Malley came from. It's an iconic KO.
Facts. All right, I'll move on to my next fight. This one does get talked about a lot, which is why it's still relatively low. Sarukian versus Gamrot. Probably in the UFC, one of the best displays of wrestling of all time. And I think we could see a similar thing, or at least outcome, with Islam, showing one of the best wrestling performances versus Armin. But this fight in particular, the scrambles were just such high level. And I think Armin probably should have won that fight. It was super razor close, so I don't, it could have gone either way. But to take it to Gamrot like that, I think it does show Armin's willingness to go in there and grit his way to a victory. Even though he didn't win that fight, he executed his game plan believing that he could win against Gamrot in a wrestling fight. And I think we're going to talk about our Islam versus Armin breakdown, but I do think that is one of the things that's going to help him maybe get a win over Islam. He believes that he can beat anyone in a wrestling fight. Yeah. He wanted to wrestle Hamzat. Like, the dude's crazy.
Yeah, he has that confidence and the swagger for, like, it's weird, like, calling him an up-and-comer, but, like, he kind of is, but he's still, like, been around for a while, and, like, his wrestling, it's, like, it's obviously elite, it's just that he's going up against potentially the best wrestler in the UFC.
Yeah.
So, fair pick. All right, my next one, Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 2. Headshot dead.
I think you just did legendary fights. I'm pretty sure you just did legendary fights at this point.
Well,
the
way that Leon Edwards was down this whole fight, and then eventually just came out and just boom, 5th round, headshot dead with like a minute left, which is kind of like never back down, never give up. And like, who knows how realistically good Leon Edwards was. Yeah. But like, was he the merchant of one kick?
No, he was good.
He was good.
It's tough though.
Yeah, it put him on that next upper echelon, was that one kick.
Exactly. It is legendary, but then he went out there and beat Usman again, so it's like fair play. He did it. Yeah. All right, moving on to my next fight. I'm going to go with Whitaker versus Vettori. Whitaker was coming off his second loss to Adesanya, which was a very close fight. And I think it's easy to get demoralized after you lose to someone for a second time, especially when you lose in such a close fashion. You believe you should have won that fight. Your mental state could honestly be terrible. And so I know mine would be. And so for Whitaker to go out there and absolutely dominate Marvin Vettori, who was such a big name at the time, such an up and coming name, and Vettori could have gotten a title shot off of that. He probably would have. So for Whitaker to just beat the brakes off of him in every aspect of that fight was super fun to watch. I just rewatched it the other day, so it's fresh in my mind. And I do think it gets overlooked a lot. Like, no one talks about it. Wait, let me guess. Who's going to be your next? What's the best performance of all time? Islam versus Volk?
No.
It's probably up there.
No, my number 4, Nate Diaz chokes out Conor McGregor.
It is legendary.
And like, for a guy like Nate Diaz, who's had such a weird career, like up and down and up and down and up and down, being the first person to go out and to beat Conor McGregor,
that's so weird.
This guy who was the face of the UFC, was the biggest star.
Yeah.
To lose to Nate Diaz, polar opposites, this massive superstar wearing these fancy suits, these supercars, and it's like Nate Diaz, like tough.
Built for tough.
Yeah, like I don't know, like, and they're like the way that there was like genuine hate between the two of them.
Yeah,
like I think that we're looking at it like those are fights that we don't want to forget in the future, but like these are ones that are like, who knows if the UFC's around in 20 years? But these are those fights, these are the performances by these fighters that it's like, oh, you remember Nate Diaz when he did this? It's like,
yeah, that's like something that lives on forever.
Reminiscing at a campfire in 20 years.
I like that. We're gonna have to preface this video with something. We'll figure out something to say.
This casual over here.
Exactly. All right, for my next pick, I have something. he was one of my favorite fighters. It's Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier too. The fact that Justin Gaethje went out there at Salt Lake City and got another iconic head kick, it was electric. I actually watched this fight live, and it was one of the first fights where I was like, oh, maybe I'm actually a bigger fan of Justin Gaethje than I thought.
And I think with that fight too is it was like, oh, he didn't just do that to some nobody.
Yeah.
He did that to Dustin Poirier.
Yeah. And I believe Dustin was the favorite. Don't quote me on that, but I'm like 99% sure he was the favorite going to that fight. He already won their first matchup. He is a better boxer. I think general consensus would say that.
Yeah.
Maybe Gaethje has a bit more power, a bit better calf kicks, but Poirier is just crisp. And it sucks. Like, I'm happy for Gaethje that he got that KO and it was hype. I think it was in the second round. But to see on the other side Poirier, what it did to his mental state, he's talked about it quite a lot on Theo Von's podcast. It was really sad, but it's not a fight that gets talked about a lot. And I think it is one of Justin Gaethje's best performances, maybe his best performance.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to my number 2. Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey, UFC 193. Ronda Rousey had the argument at the time to be the most dominant fighter inside of the whole UFC, men or women. And Holm had this legendary head kick KO to beat Ronda Rousey, who was undefeated and the champion. And it was kind of like, oh, crap. Like everyone thought that Ronda Rousey.
Oh, crap.
Everyone thought that Ronda Rousey was completely unbeatable. Like no one's ever going to touch her. Holly Holm was like the super underdog. And just boom, the OG headshot dead.
True.
The OG headshot dead. And I think maybe people forget about this one because people don't care about women's MMA.
Yeah, I don't. So basically what you did before this video was you just typed up, what are the most popular fights of all time? What are considered the best fights of all time? And then you just wrote that down in a list.
Yeah, basically.
Is that what you did?
Yeah, what about it?
No, nothing, man. I don't have a problem with it. The comments are going to have a problem with it. My runner-up pick is going to be Strickland versus Adesanya. It's not something that gets talked about very much anymore, but for Strickland to be... I remember the night I watched this, I was all alone. And Izzy was that, and I was stroking that thing. No, I'm kidding. Izzy was such a massive favorite. No one in their right mind gave Strickland a chance. Like it was kind of like Jose Aldo versus Conor McGregor. Everyone picked Jose Aldo to win, right? No one in their right mind gives Sean Strickland a chance to win this. It was basically just a sacrifice. For a title fight because they needed a main event and they threw Sean Strickland to the wolves. I think he was ranked about 4 or 5 at the time. And for him in the first round, it was like, all right, this is even. He might even be getting the better of Izzy. Wow. End of the first round or middle of the first round, lands that straight down the pipe, spins his head around like a top. Oh, it was unbelievable, freaking out. And then he couldn't finish him, and you're like, okay, well, it's going to be over in the next couple of rounds. Then he just dominates him for 4 rounds. So it was one of the craziest experiences that I've ever watched live, like one of the biggest underdog stories that I've ever seen live. And at the time, they were calling it, like during the fight, or right after it, the announcers were like, this is the biggest underdog win of all time.
And like the way that like it's almost harder to go out and beat your opponent 50-45 than if like Strickland would have finished him.
True.
Like 50-45ing Adesanya,
it just proves you're better.
Who at that time was like the future of middleweight. Like people were like, oh, he's gonna be the GOAT. He's gonna pass Anderson Silva. Moving on to number 1.
Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo. No. I don't know. It's the most casual fight you could have picked.
No. You don't know? You gotta guess. There's one fight that the streets will never forget.
The streets will never forget this fight.
Streets will never forget this fight.
Is it like recent or is it?
One of the most iconic performances of all time.
Is it Conor McGregor?
No.
No? Is it Alex Pereira?
No.
Who? Okay, well, there's literally infinite fights I could choose from.
What fight do I glaze every video?
I don't know.
I talked about it in our last video.
Dude, my brain shuts off when we film YouTube videos.
The last fight I talked about in the last video. It was a nice and beautiful night.
Great.
Saturday night it was.
There we go.
At UFC 207. And we were set for a bantamweight championship fight.
Ugh, get a grip on yourself.
Firstly, the challenger, tatted up in his blue, Cody Garbrandt walks down. Next, the champion, Dominic Cruz makes his way to the ring. Garbrandt in the blue corner, Cruz in the red corner. The bell rings, no one knowing that we were going to see.
People are going to see there's 30 minutes left of this video and it's just you narrating the fight.
Pause. Nobody knew, but we were going to see one of the most iconic performances of all time. Garbrandt, a great fighter, but was never that top tier. But for 25 minutes that night, he went to flow state. He was the best version of himself. And we were never going to see that 25 minutes again. Bopping, weaving, shots to the head, dance moves. Garbrandt was in full control. By the end of the night, Cruz was defeated. Garbrandt was the champion. But no one was ever going to forget that performance by Garbrandt.
You should write fanfic. You'd be good at that.
I was feeling myself there. Probably seduced a couple people.
Yeah, me included. All right, my number one pick is going to be Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis, the GOAT. No, not the GOAT, but one of our favorite fighters. Underrated, overlooked, coming off a KO loss. Actually, pretty much to my other pick, and then to go out there and he literally toyed with BSD, who was the biggest up and comer French Marine who has a squash face and an upside down smile, and then he just went out there, jumped the ghillie 5 times, KO'd BSD, and it was hype. I was low key thought I was overrating BSD. I was like, dude, BSD is a good dude. He's powerful. Dude, BSD is a good shot at beating Dustin Poirier on the ground. He's strong. And then for that to go out and happen, unbelievable.
No one's ever picking BSD again.
No.
Absolutely cooked.
Cinema.
All right, that is going to wrap it up for us today. Make sure you guys go down to those comments. Let us know what was the biggest streets we'll never forget performance of all time. Let us know how you liked the different style of the narration in the last fight.
Shut up.
The videos might end up being 6 hours long, but if you like it, we'll do it for you guys. While you're down there, make sure you guys like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
See ya.